Hey everybody, this is Dylan. I'm here with Dr. Frank Sabatino of the Balance for Life Retreat Center in Florida, and we're going to talk a little bit about what is healthy. People are getting into trouble in this country and around the world. More obesity, more drugs, more sickness forever. What happened?
Well, I think what happened is they put too much reliance on a medical system that does nothing more than just medicate problems and not really do the work of education, really helping people learn and understand what they can do to help themselves. We know enough information now about how diet affects health, how activity, how all the factors of lifestyle medicine are so powerful for promoting healthy outcome, and yet we still have a country that is beyond drugged. I mean, we have 5% of the world's population. We use 80% of the world's opiates.
Wow.
We have 5% of the world's population. We use 95% of the drugs used to treat attention deficit in children. So I pose the question, what's the rest of the world doing for pain and attention deficit? Not doing that. So again, I think it's a question of that. We've gotten off the track. We've lost sight of the power that we have within our own personal choices to affect everything from the outcome of the cellular part of our bodies right deep down into the genetic expression of our bodies. We now know that simple lifestyle choices will even modify the expression of our own genetic machinery. So people have to really get back into that sense of stepping inside rather than looking to voices of authority outside and understanding the power they have to heal from within.
I want to ask you more about the genetic part, but first, what about the food? What has gotten to the point where we're all needing the quote, needing the meds? What have we done? What have we changed about the food, and what is the ideal way to eat and live?
Well, the
Solve it all.
argument is that I don't think we got to the place of needing the meds. I think that mentality kept being incorporated more and more into us. The truth is, yes, do we have problems with the way food is processed? Do we have problems with the way food is being sprayed and treating with chemicals that are affecting the population? We do. But the fundamental eating plan that is really of the best quality is just a high quality plant exclusive diet. It always has been and it always will be. You know, I saw a little placard the other day. It says we've gotten so divorced from reality that we need studies to tell us that fruits and vegetables are healthy. It's just amazing that we've gotten that far away from fundamental truth. I mean, when you look at the idea that the sun is the major source of energy, there's only one thing on the planet that can capture that and produce food are fruits and vegetables, plants. So going directly to the plant source of nutrition is always going to be in our best interest. Cutting out all the middlemen of animals and things that are storing toxic waste, that are producing excessive amounts of fat. And so as we moved into a more standard American diet, it became a diet of affluence that wound up creating diseases of affluence, cancer, heart disease, obesity. And what we're advocating is just moving back in the direction of a plant-based that builds in all the nutrient value we need at lower calorie density. We can eat larger volumes of really incredibly tasting, incredibly appealing food, and that's where we need to go.
Yeah, a common misconception we hear about a lot in our group and others where we're trying to help people find health and happiness is they think, well, isn't everybody a little different? Don't different people have different diets and our genes and the blood types and all these things? And I've got a certain gene for cancer, so it's more likely that I'm going to get cancer, and I should do all these things. What is the role of genes?
That question covers a lot. Because what we know is that there's no question that genetically we're all basically different. At the same time, we also basically have the same gene pool. And we have the same gene pool very similar to other primates in nature, which is interesting. You look at an animal in nature like a bonobo, they have 99.9% of our gene pool. So yes, the small variations that we have individually are there, and they may belie certain things that could happen. So for example, if you have a genetic environment that makes it impossible for you to produce insulin, there's no choice. You got to take insulin from the outside. But what we now know is that there's a whole field of what is called epigenetics, meaning we have a basic gene pool, but it's as much as that gene pool is hardwired, you do not have to be a slave to the deck of genetic cards that you were dealt, because we now know that lifestyle factors like plant-based eating, physical exercise, stress management can modify the actual things that are working on that gene pool to allow it to express one way or another. So for example, genes can be turned on and off. Even though they're there, they can be turned on and off by how they're modified by these outside influences. And what we've come to find is that when you eat plant-based, those modifications basically suppress cancer, they suppress heart disease, they suppress many of the major diseases we suffer with. They also support all the incredible bacterial population in our gut that also promotes those same outcomes, reducing cancer, reducing heart disease. And the truth is, there is no other eating plan that will do that. So with whatever the minor differences we may have individually, the eating plan for the human primate is still a plant-exclusive approach. And if you're not going to stay plant-exclusive, you better make sure that the other stuff you eat is an extremely small part of anything you consume.
Let's talk about the gut a little bit. You mentioned that. What happens when we switch from a bad standard American diet to something healthy and people are feeling really gassy and uncomfortable? Tell us the role of the gut first, maybe.
Interestingly enough, and this is always mind-boggling to me, we have 10 trillion cells in the human body, but we have 100 trillion bacteria and microbes in the gut. And you got to pose the question, why and how have we developed and or evolved to have a population that outnumbers us 100 trillion to 1? What is that there for? And we find that now we've come to an understanding that the relationship we have with that environment is affecting us on every imaginable level, affecting the quality of our heart health, our brain health, our attitude, our state of mood, everything. So we come to find out that now as we're feeding our bodies, we need to feed that environment. We need to take care of that garden. And as it turns out, when you're eating high fiber plant-based foods, that's exactly what happens. So when you eat in the way we're recommending, it increases what some of the people have talked about as diversity of the gut. The species of the bacteria, the good bacteria, become more diverse and more profoundly helpful for generating a healthy outcome. The more you deviate from those foods, eating more processed, low-fiber foods, higher animal products, the actual identity of the environment, the identity of that population shifts. It changes. And not only that, it can change in a way where now some of these negative bacteria can start to damage the lining of the gut, causing it to become leaky, allowing toxins and things to seep through into the body, into the brain, affecting us on many, many levels. So the way we eat is having an impact not only on us, but that 100 trillion population that's operating within us. And it's very intriguing to me that the most opportune diet for that population is also plant exclusive. And I think it's just remarkable every step of the way. If we look at the bacterial environment, if we look at the genetic environment, if we look at our normal environment, plant-based eating is a positive influence on all of that, and nothing else is. It's remarkable.
And how did we come up with this plant-based eating thing? I mean, is it something we just decided when we started studying things in studies, or is this how we've been eating in our natural history?
I think this is the ancient diet of our species. I mean, I think it's the thing we started out with, and then I think we went into agriculture and we went into selective pressures in the environment where food supplies were scarce and we had to hunt and kill, and there's many different hypotheses of how that evolution occurred over time. But we're talking about eating the most natural food for man. I love this idea of people trying to push the Paleo Diet as if when you look at the caveman diet, that was the pristine diet and they were eating meat. As it turns out, I did an article some years back on that diet, and I took some of that information from an article published in National Geographic. Apparently there are a handful of cultures on planet Earth right now that still live in Paleolithic times, exactly the way it was.
Right.
And so they said, let's take a look at what they're doing. Well, as it turns out, their diet was still basically plant-based. And the reason is, when they went out to hunt and kill for food, the men mostly came home empty-handed. So the women and children were still picking berries and picking whatever they could find to eat. So the diet was still relatively plant-based because of the pressures of the environment. So I think, look, we as humans are adaptable. And I think if the environment shifted and we had to hunt and kill, we would do whatever we had to do to feed ourselves. And maybe there was some small place in history where that was essential and necessary, but that ain't now. And the truth is, we know enough about eating in those manners, that in that way, to know that that increases what I like to call oxidative and inflammatory stress, to an extent that it promotes most of the major chronic diseases that we suffer with. And when you're eating in more of a plant-based manner, you're just reversing that. You're eliminating that. You're removing those risk factors.
Thank you. So let's talk about stress.
Okay.
This is, I think, an underrated issue. We think we've got all these issues, diabetes, chronic illness, all we've got to do is change the food and everything's going to be great, but we overlook one of the most serious impacts on our health, which is stress. Day-to-day life in this kind of standard America land is pretty rambunctious.
Yeah. Well, we live in a culture right now where we're constantly being pulled outside of ourselves. The chatter is overwhelming. So, we have this anxiety of really trying to keep up with information and trying to process everything as quickly as we can. And it creates a state of unrest, a state of dissonance. Now, understand that stress is kind of an umbrella term that can mean many different things. Because think about this, if you were going to perform in a game or on a stage, a little bit of stress may motivate that performance. So it's not that it's just negative all the time. But if you think about it in a chronic way, that it creates factors that create anxiety and worry, then it is an issue. And so what happens is in our culture, we are constantly inundated with conditions and things that we interpret in a subtle way as an internal threat or stress. And the body has a unique way of responding to that in what's called the fight or flight response. So it's either going to try to fight that or run away from it. And to do either of those things, it starts releasing a series of hormones through our adrenal system, which is the fight or flight system, to try to modify that stressful circumstance. And in the process, you're getting impact on heart, blood pressure, digestion, sexual function. And if you don't reduce the chronic nature of that, you will end up with chronic diseases of those systems. And that's why stress management or handling stress relies on us being more mindful, us being more present, not getting lost in the sorrows and traumas of the past or worries about the future, but understanding that the moment you're in is basically the moment you have. And what can you do in that moment using your own perception, your own awareness and consciousness to set things or to act on things in a way that gives your body the opportunity for a healthy outcome. Because the truth is, we have a mind-body connection, and most of us are using our own minds and consciousness as a tool for destruction.
So how do we do it?
Well, we can do that with techniques related to meditation, the breathing techniques. You can do things like yoga, tai chi. You can just be more mindful, stepping back, delaying your response. But I will tell you, stress happens in three ways. People only think about stress on a emotional or thinking level, intellectual level, when in fact there are three T's to stress. There's trauma, there's toxins, and there's thought. And in our culture, if you have an injury or a trauma, there's going to be a stressful outcome. We have a lot of toxicity. Think about how in our eating habits, the use of refined and processed fats, creating all those free radicals and inflammatory agents, refined sugars, all the additives, pesticides, herbicides, those are all toxic stresses on the body. So those things have to be removed. So stress management doesn't only involve meditation, it involves cleaning up the diet. It involves making things a little cleaner in your life. It involves understanding how you're using your mind, how you're eating, how you're moving, how you're dealing with relationships. So all of us can be more conscious of those things, and that's what it takes. And in a culture where most people seem to wander around in a state of unconsciousness, that may not be an easy thing. But that's what we have to get back to. How can we take some time each day to step back from the chatter of our lives so that we can kind of enter that sanctuary of our own inner space? It's not an easy thing to do in a culture that's always pulling us outside. And to enter and I love this line, one of the famous family therapists, Virginia Satir, where we enter that sacred place within ourselves where we discover the treasure that is called by our name. I love that line. Yeah. Because the truth is we have that internal sense and core of who we truly are away from all of the ego, chatter, and dissonance. But we have to step back from that each day so we really get more in line with that again. How do we attach to that again? And we need it now more than ever. And our younger people need it even more now than ever. This is even more of an anxious, depressed generation for all the stuff that's going on around us.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're working on a book. I think it's focused more on weight loss, correct?
Well, the book focuses, it's called Weightless, Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. I've looked at a lot of the issues, and we know obesity is a major pandemic in this world. And too many of the books focus on calories in, calories out, exercise, food, and that's all important. But I wanted to really get into the panorama of what's really involved when we're eating and dealing with weight issues. So This book has everything related to all the factors of stress and sleep and addiction and all of the factors in addition to food and activity that go into our relationship with food. And so that's why I wanted to write it that way. And so that's what I did.
Wonderful. Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on it. And it's at Balance for Health. We'll find you there. I'll put
Balance
a website.
for Life.
Balance for Life.
Balance for Life in Deerfield Beach, Florida. And we have a residential program, a residential health retreat. And we look forward to having people come down.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hey! All right.
How'd that go?
Awesome.
Good. We're good?
We got to get you on YouTube more often.
Yeah, I know. I love it. It's fun.